can you please explain your statement that since the Great Depression, American government has become the enemy of the family?
Absolutely. You know, it's sad to see the great destruction of the family in America. You can see it whether it's in the inner city areas or whether it's in the middle class or the upper middle class areas of America. During the Depression, the American people were sold a bill of goods that socialism is good, that we need government to give us a safety net so that there's, a fair, level playing ground. But what it did was it slowly took the property, the income away from the working men and women, paid that in taxes to the federal government so the federal government could give us free services. Nothing's ever free from government. The government can't give you something unless it takes it away from someone else. So as the income level of the average American became less and less, he became more dependent upon government for the social security that we needed, for homes, for housing, for food, for the care and keep of children. All this became all of a sudden a social issue. The average worker was making less money because less take-home pay because the government was taking it away from him. So he had to depend then more on the government. So the family did not have the same value that it once had. So now instead of the family, the nuclear family and the extended family being responsible for mama, daddy, grandmother, grandparents, for each other, and a mutual responsibility for brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts and cousins, and within the community a responsibility for our neighbors, the kith and kin, that all died because the money was no longer there. It was going to Washington, and Washington was going to take care of us. The family then became less and less and less important.
How do you plan to tap into Tea Party efforts and push for a constitutional amendment that recognizes the right of nullification?
You know, this is a great time in America. If anything good has come out of the last presidential election, it is the fact that the American people can see what the secular humanists, what the nominal socialists are trying to do to us. And the American people reject that. We are not a leftist nation. We are a center-to-right nation. We believe in liberty. Most Americans want to be left alone. They'll pay reasonable taxes for national defense, for the things that are absolutely necessary, and then just leave us alone. And that's how we built the country. Mm-hmm. The pioneers went across the West settling the country. They didn't need a social safety net. They just needed government to protect the borders and leave us alone. Well, that's what the Tea Party people are saying. That's what Americans of all social strata are saying right now. Just leave us alone. Well, how can you be left alone when all power is concentrated in the federal government in Washington, D.C.? When Washington, D.C. is deciding, what do you pay for gas? What food can you eat? Where do you go to get your health care? What type of education do you give your children? All this is being determined in Washington, D.C. Now look, there must be about, Donald, 237 millionaires and multimillionaires in Congress right now.
Right.
Now, do you think these multi-millionaire congressmen have any empathy for people like us? Of course not. They have no way that they can determine how the laws that they pass on us, like cap and trade, for instance, that's going to greatly increase the cost of food. Food? Yes, because how does food get to your grocery store shelves? It's transported, through 18-wheelers, through all types of so the price of everything is going to go up. It's going to hit the American people. The average congressman, he doesn't understand that. The American people intuitively know that you can't rely upon electing good men or women and sending them to Congress. They don't remain good men and women. Mm-hmm. The perks, the privileges, the power that is Washington, D.C. There's a vested interest by all who deal in Washington, D.C. to maintain that Leviathan. And it is a federal empire. And that empire is not going to discipline itself. It's like a bratty child. A bratty child will not discipline himself. It takes the people, the parents, to discipline the child. Well, we the people, we are the parents. Our Our sovereign community, our sovereign states created the federal government. The federal government is the agent of our states. The state is our agent as citizens of each individual sovereign state. And we are going to discipline our agent. Our agent will not tell us how to live our lives. We will rule the government, not the government rule the people.
And I think it's very interesting to note that Ron and I have been following since the early 60s the general discontent in America with government. This is not something that happened overnight. Now, certainly the Tea Party movement and the town hall meetings, that is something that in this last 12 months we've really seen. This is really something that it looks like to the uninitiated that all of a sudden it just jumped up there. But I've been following since the 1960s the general discontent. Every year, I think it's one of the major polling institutions, I think it's the Gallup, will do a how do you feel about government type of poll. And every year since about 1965, more than half of Americans distrust government. They have a sense that this government is not doing what I want it to do. And since 1960, that has grown and grown and grown. Look, right now, the latest poll, Congress, the approval rate of Congress is not over 25-30%. That means that 75% of Americans disapprove, distrust, and are not happy with Congress. Now, I'm talking about Democrat and Republican. So there's a groundswell of feeling in America that's reaching a critical mass. And if you know anything about chemistry, in chemistry there's a thing called critical mass. You have to have so much of an item, so much pressure, so much heat, energy, before you get a gigantic explosion. We are approaching critical mass. What Ron and I are trying to do in this book, Nullifying Tyranny, is to get people to look at what can we do in a reasonable manner that we can solve this problem. Otherwise, we know that we could spin off into a revolutionary endeavor, much like what happened in France during the reign of the French Terror, and maybe even Nazi Germany, or in Lenin's Soviet Union. So we don't want that. We are Americans. We want to control this. We want liberty and freedom to be the central theme and not a revolutionary explosion. But we're reaching that critical mass. All we have to do is just show people there is an American solution to the problem, and that's what this is.
And just one more comment. You recently attended the National 10th Amendment Summit. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it went?
It was wonderful. That was in Atlanta, Georgia. Mm-hmm. It was co-sponsored by the 10th Amendment Committee out of Los Angeles, California, not Birmingham, Alabama, out of California, and also co-sponsored by Ray McBarry, the Republican candidate for governor in Georgia. And we had people from states all around the Union, and I know California, Utah, Vermont, Indiana, Illinois. I met a gentleman from Illinois who's running for governor on the Libertarian ticket. This is not a Republican thing. We had Democrat, Republicans, Libertarians, Constitutionalists, and Independents there. And they all came there together to talk about how they can use their campaigns to promote the concept of limited government, i.e. the 10th Amendment. And it was just marvelous to see this. And we had a great meeting. Judge Roy Moore spoke to us. Ray McBarry spoke. Quite a few people spoke there. And everybody was keenly interested on how do we get government under control. And one of the things that we mentioned in our resolution at the end was the idea of nullification. So the idea of nullification is not something that the Kennedy twins has come up with. This is traditional American history. How do you limit, how do you control the central government? And this is one of the means. The 10th Amendment, limiting the power of the federal government and forcing the federal government to abide by the Constitution. And it was a wonderful meeting. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, especially meeting people from Indiana and Vermont who was pro-states' rights. This is not a Southern idea, as I said. This is an American idea.